Welcome to the Inner Space Project podcast, where we explore the full spectrum of emotions, from joy and love to sadness and fear, taking you on an inner space journey that challenges societal norms, encourages open dialogue, and raises awareness about all the parts of us, including the ones that may seem dark and mysterious. I'm your host, Dr. Patti Ashley, psychotherapist, author, TEDx speaker, and clinical trainer. Thank you for joining me as we navigate the labyrinth of emotions, dismantle stigma, and pave the way for a more compassionate and connected world. Hi, welcome to this episode of the Inner Space Project podcast. We're going to talk about an episode related to endings where we touch on the heart of grief and loss. And my special guest today has had many roles in his life and seems to be continuously finding ways to help promote emotional healing. He's a licensed professional counselor, certified grief counselor, ordained minister, and a New Mexico certified educator. He's the co-author of Witnessing Ted, The Journey to Potential Through Grief and Loss. He's the founder of Golden Willow Counseling, a behavioral health agency, and Golden Willow Retreat, a nonprofit emotional healing center focused on grief, loss, trauma, and recovery. He's a program director of the Southwestern College Trauma, Grief, and Renewal Certificate, and he also maintains a private practice. He's been seen on the Oprah Winfrey Network. He's been seen as a guest on the Shania Twain Why Not series, as well as other documentaries focused on transformation through loss. The list goes on. So it's obvious that Ted passionately believes in the potential of the phenomenological transformational moment that every person owns the ability to experience and celebrate. That was a mouthful. Welcome, Ted Wiard, who's going to share how his life experiences have helped guide and motivate his drive to be of professional service, with his primary focus on emotional healing and recovery from loss, trauma, and addiction. Welcome, Ted Wiard. Yay! Hi, Ted.
It's good to see you, Patty. And why, that is a mouthful. I guess I've been a little bit busy.
A little bit, I'll say. You're always busy. I know you down in Taos, New Mexico. You are the town of Taos, New Mexico. Anything happens, people call Ted.
Well, it's good. And you've been down here and you've gotten to be a colleague of mine besides a friend. And I know your passion for what you're doing here. And it's such an honor that you asked me to
Oh my
be
gosh,
here.
it's so glad you could be here with us, because yeah, I did get to experience time with you in Taos and see you in action, and your work just comes strictly from your heart. So let's start with that question. Like, tell us about you and your work of heart.
Well, thanks, Patty. And my work comes from a lot of my losses. And, as a school teacher, a good old school teacher, taught fifth grade and a tennis pro and doing that sort of world. And then in a very short time period, I almost died. Actually left my body. I don't know if I told you that piece. Left my body, wasn't wise enough to turn around and see what else was out there, and then came slamming back down into my body. And then my brother died in a shipwreck very soon after that, up in Alaska in a commercial fishing shipwreck.
Mm-hmm.
And then soon after that, we found out that my wife had cancer. And we had a 1 and a 3 year old at the time. And so all of a sudden, this really cool life fell apart. And so for the next 2 years, we danced with that cancer. And we learned a lot about a lot of different types of losses and different types of deaths. And after those 2 years, her body was done. And so she died, and leaving me with a 5 and a 3 year old, carrying Amy, to raise as a single dad. And I got pretty good at braiding hair, but still when they'd get to school, the teachers would rebraid their hair. But we became quite a team. And the three of us were doing the world, single dad with two little girls. And then all of a sudden with their grandmother, my mother-in-law, they got in a car crash in which they all died. My mother-in-law, Rachel, she died immediately, along with my youngest daughter, Amy. And then my oldest daughter, at 9 at that time, died the next day at the trauma center that led me on a very interesting, I guess you could say, journey, mostly wanting to die. I understood craving to the highest level. I would have died for one more hit, without a doubt. And I actually wanted to die. I wanted to go join my family. So my good friend and mentor, Jean Maé, who owned in the ski area, the Hotel St. Bernard, gave me his keys to his place in Maui. Not as a holiday, but I left Taos and went to Maui. And I still remember so many days sitting on that beach or standing on that beach going, if I just swim straight out, the currents can take me away. One of the reasons that was stopped is my brother had drowned in the Pacific Ocean. I didn't think it would be fair to my family if I too drowned in the Pacific Ocean. From there, I bounced around the world, broke as heck, but moved around to different areas in search of myself and in my brain in a search of a place to die. Luckily, instead, I checked myself into a treatment center. And they asked how many beers I had. I said about 4. And they said in a day, and I said no, in a year. And they asked me how much hard liquor I drank, and I said probably 2 shots. And they said in a day, and I said no, probably in 4 years. So they decided I was lying and minimizing and said, come on in. And I've worked in big treatment centers, and so I understand within those assessments, if someone knocks on your door and then says they don't do any type of substances or whatever addiction that place is known for, there's probably some barrier. So, but luckily that saved my life. They learned quickly. I mean, it was a good place, and that's where I did learn. My drug of choice was gone, my daughter's, and there was no dealer. And so in that treatment center, I agreed to live. And so I took off even the drug of, if this doesn't work, I can kill myself. If that doesn't work, I can. So I took that out of my equation. From there, I decided I had enough time away. It's kind of like a UFO picked me up and gave me time to re-find myself from being shattered. And from there, because I was having this weird thing about God, because I didn't want to have God, but why did I keep asking for God? But if God was really there, then God must be evil. But then what's this love and what's connection? So I went to ministerial school. And there I actually met my present wife, Marcella. And we drove back to Taos in a funky RV and started Golden Willow. It was actually an RV. From there, we started Golden Willow Retreat, which is an emotional sanctuary focused on grief and loss. And so all of a sudden, we had a place that people could come and say, I'm sad, I have loss. From that, we had 10, 12-year-olds come out and build a chapel, and we homeschooled them for a year and built our Capilla de las Angelitas, the Chapel of the Little Angels. And from there, we've just continued to grow. And so people come from all over the world and stay with us. And luckily, a lot of people have me go all over the world and come up and stay with them. And so I'm able to help a wonderful nation up in Canada. I get to go south a lot, and of course, east and west, and have the chance to help people in their time of change, which is called loss. So I'm excited, and I have a horrendous story, and I gotta tell you, today, that still all sucks.
Yeah.
It's horrendous. And yes, I would love to hug my girls one more time.
Right.
And I'm a happier person today. I'm more connected. I have more meaning in life. I feel more connected spiritually. Hopefully, I'm more conscious. And each day, I am so grateful for each breath I get. So through those, I was able to all of a sudden move from a place of being confined and defined by such difficult times and move them to be my vehicle that I get to do a wonderful life in. So that's a quick part of my story, and I appreciate you telling it to me.
I remember when I first heard that story, I said, that's the saddest thing I've ever heard. And yes, I realize how I'm thinking of a quote, Carl Jung's quote, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious, something like that. I'm probably not 100%. That's what I'm hearing in you, is like making the darkness conscious, which is really what the Inner Space Project is about, and what my work is about, and what your work is about. And you're right, it never goes away. And yet we become more conscious with it, and we bring light, we shed light into it. And then, studies of resiliency show when we're able to give back, when find a purpose, it somehow takes the sting off. And the amount of work that you've done, the depth that you bring to the work is so incredible, which is how we connected, because I'd lost my partner and my father when I was a child, and all I could think of was people need a place to go after they've had a loss. And a friend of mine Googled, and we found you down in Taos, and took me years to finally wrangle you and connect with you. And I'm so glad to have that experience and to be able to have this conversation with you. So tell us a little bit about what happens at Golden Willow, because I refer people to you all the time, and it's definitely such a sacred place. I know you mentioned a little bit, but
And thanks for referring. It means you care, and you trust. Um, the special piece of Golden Willow, besides being a sanctuary that's rural, but you're safe, and you have people come and go, oh, I thought I was going to be in a sleeping bag in a tent. It's like, no, we have a real home, and it's set up like a home. And we only allow two people or one family at a time.
Mhm.
And so the biggest thing I tell people immediately is there's only one promise I can give, and that's you will not be judged. You will only be honored for the bravery to show up.
Mhm.
And that's deeply and sincerely by the entire staff felt and stated. So someone day comes, and it can be from any loss where we feel we've gotten stuck,
Mhm.
where our world's just not happening. Somehow we're not transitioning whatever that experience, rite of passage, trauma, loss, whatever loss that happens to be. And I see, Patti, as you know, I see loss as any time how I've identified myself has shifted
Mhm.
because the old me died.
Mhm.
And grief is the process of redefining of who I am today. Doesn't mean I have to dispose of everything from my past. I got blonde hair, and that blonde hair, luckily all 17 of them still stays here, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
And so that's still my past and my present. But when we have that loss, we go through a rite of passage, and good or bad or in between. But grief is the process of redefining. So I'm on the foundation of who I am today. So as I step forward, I'm coming from that place rather than a historical part of the brain. As we do, we believe in neuroplasticity. If I'm only thinking in the past, my brain's not growing.
Mhm.
That's all history.
Right.
So when someone comes, we're caught in that loss, which is already history. That makes us overwhelmed to the future, and the two collide, and I'm in a free fall. So
Mhm.
Golden Willow is trying to rebuild a new, with new formats, new wisdom, new foundations, the new foundation of someone's reality, of their definition of their life. And so Golden Willow, through many modalities, from massage, and if somebody doesn't want touch, Reiki, from yoga, and if someone's body is not able to do yoga, Tai Chi, and then the therapeutic process, and really looking at someone's entire history from birth till today, and allowing them to find things that maybe have blocked some of their growth, or
Mhm.
unresolved losses,
Mhm. Mhm.
and even unresolved traumas.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean they go away, but all of a sudden they can be that scar of wisdom that helps me presently.
Mhm.
So through ceremony, through, well, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally, we're trying to hit all four quadrants so that they have that solid base. And then they can step out back into the world more in who they are today. And it's amazing. It's so incredible. People come in with these sad, intense stories, and as they leave, you just see this lightness,
Mhm.
and they're smiling, and they're going to say, "That was fun." Oh, I can't say that because I came for grief. And but they've had this experience that was about them being seen, heard, and valued by themselves as well as witnessed. And
Mhm.
so Golden Will Retreat gives us the chance to do that, and it's usually about 5 to 7 days. And it's just so incredibly awesome to watch someone take their backpack off, take the things out that aren't serving them, put the nutrients in that they now need, and then step back out into the world.
Hmm. It's remarkable. And you also do weekend retreats sometimes on different topics like the loss of a child, which is all too tender for you.
This year we have loss of a child. Wow, that's good timing. Um, you know, we have coming up in May, we have loss of a partner weekend,
Mm.
which had somehow slipped away for the last couple of years after COVID. And I all of a sudden realized we needed to bring that back in. And then we do have loss of a child in June. Then we have a new one that we started last year that you're welcome to, Patty, and it's the alumni renewal. And
Mm.
that's where we really look at emotional sobriety. So it's someone who's come to any of the weekend workshops, the long-term workshops, and we come together for a weekend. And it's also our butterfly release weekend.
Oh, is it? Okay. Which is beautiful.
So it
Yeah.
is beautiful. And people are honoring butterflies for all sorts of reasons. So we have about 450 butterflies released.
So talk about what that is for people
And
who don't
it,
know the
it,
butterfly.
the butterfly release was started. Somebody comes as this little caterpillar, and whatever reason and whatever way, and we give them a chance in that chrysalis to move around and wiggle around and open up to become their full potential once again. The butterfly release, which is so cool about it, though that funding, though, because people buy butterflies, for people who are alive, who are dead, for the earth, for
Mhm.
whatever it is, and we release them. And that money goes to the 5 different grief groups we have, because we have for free. We have a
Mhm.
live one here in Taos, but then we have 4, maybe 5, it always depends, online. So we call those our national grief groups.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
we started those because of COVID.
Mhm.
Actually, we started those the day after the insurrection because I was so blown away. And so we opened them up.
Mhm.
We opened them up so they weren't 6 weeks on, 2 weeks off, but we kept, so now we have these national grief groups where people are coming to share their losses for free. So,
Mhm.
so we
Beautiful.
have that, and it's really neat because the alumni, as Golden Willow's a nonprofit, really the alumni are the owners. So all these alumni are the hosts of everyone coming to release the butterflies. And we have it, of course, on Zoom as well as people that are presently there. And we're just honoring this. And so it's really a cool weekend, as you can
And
tell.
that's June what?
That one is
Oh, July.
July 26th through the 28th. That
Okay.
one,
Okay.
that one is my daughters died on the 29th and the 30th, so we try to have it right around their anniversary. And part of it's also my passion is similar to a butterfly, because I got squished.
Mhm.
I got shattered. And even on a tough day today, I breathe for my girls because they can't. And
Mm.
that gets me out of bed and makes me do the best I possibly can because
Mhm.
I have another breath, or I at least have this breath.
Mhm.
I hope I have another breath. And so that is part of the passion and the whole idea of that butterfly release. And
Mhm.
then we end the summer in October, I guess we'd call it fall, October 18th through the 20th, where we have healing from loss. And in other words, emotional healing from any loss. The others are all pretty specific. But
Mhm.
it's a chance to come together and realize we're all trying to heal and
Yeah.
have some cognitive handholds so we have enough intellectual safety to be able to step into the unknown to work on the emotional piece, which your podcast is all about.
Yeah. It is. It is.
Really awesome.
And my story is nobody wanted to talk to me when my father died. And so I kept my whole life thought, wow, this is a pretty bad thing. And I want to talk about it. So that's why the Inner Space Project is about talking about things that are hard to talk about. And speaking of grief, it's probably what, in my experience, been what I've heard from people in my own story
Thank you.
is for me, it was the shame around not knowing who to talk to or how to talk about something that, especially as a young child, wasn't really on the table to talk about because the MO was we don't want to upset her, which is the big thing around grief is, the one thing I hear people say is, I don't want to talk to this person about their loss because I don't want to remind them of it. But, the truth is telling the story, what I've heard at least 100 times is so important for grief to continue to allow that person legacy light be in our lives, and to have what I call enlightened witnesses that can hold that space for us. So can you speak a little bit about that? About, well, there's a couple themes there. There's one is our cultural idea that we don't want to talk about grief because it's too upsetting for people, and also how to give people, or what's some insights in terms of helping people be that enlightened witness.
Beautiful. This is how deeply I believe in grief. I think a large part of our world's problem
Mm-hmm.
is actually due to unresolved trauma and grief. And
Amen.
we lost our natural, normal healing process called grief because we lost the storyteller.
Yeah.
And in losing the storyteller,
Mm-hmm.
we lost us having wisdom from someone else's story.
Mm-hmm.
Because when someone tells a story, we put ourselves into the story. And so we lost this natural process, such, the cycle of a hero, Jesus Christ, Buddha, all these different heroes, where it's all about going through this process to come out with that new piece of wisdom called enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as we watch our different governments, there's just so many parallels. I don't even have to go political. That split through fear because of unresolved trauma and grief puts us in the lowest part of our brain.
Ah, so true, right?
So we
Such
can't bridge. If I
right.
take a staunch stance, I'll say against you, because those are the right words.
Mm-hmm.
Patty, no matter what you tell me, if I'm in that staunch position, I'm going to take that staunch position stronger.
Right.
Even if it is you telling me, Ted, you need oxygen. If I have taken a staunch position on it, there's no place. And that's fear.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, in bringing back, such as your show and these pieces, where it's like, no, we need the storyteller. So, the storyteller starts with telling our story.
Mm-hmm.
It also, I do believe, the elixir of grief to have us move through an event and move up to the present is by telling our story.
Mm-hmm.
We have just been told so much, oh, that doesn't really matter. Look how selfish you're being. It's all about you. And also, I don't want to know about your hurt because I don't know what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, quite often, that might be the excuse for not listening to someone's story or asking for their story.
Mm-hmm.
That can wound me more if I'm the one who has a loss. Because now I know if you're the one who's not asking me, Patty, I know you don't trust me to walk my path, so I must be tainted good, so I better shut up.
Right. Exactly. Yes.
And so, in telling the story, we're moving that narrative into the present rather than being confined and defined. Because my body and my psyche and everything is saying, this has to move through me, not be bottled up inside me.
Yeah.
And so that's where I love how you opened up those two questions, because on the collective, I think we're in a place of the loss of the storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
And so also we need to hear, I trust you to walk your path, and how can I support that path?
Mm-hmm.
Rather than I avoid you because I don't trust you, but probably more, I don't trust me to be able to be there with you rather than just be there.
Right. And the at least you have, something, people try and do that, at least, try and talk people out of the grief. Somebody tried to give me that rescue remedy, homeopathic
I
stuff.
remember that. I remember that.
Right after my partner died, I said, I don't want that. I'm not supposed to feel good right now. I don't want to be rescued. I'm grieving. Let me grieve. So yeah, and I like the thing that I like to hear, or I liked to hear when I was experiencing grief, was people asking me to talk about my partner, talk about the person who died. I just want to tell the story. I loved what you said about stories. We're wired for stories.
Yeah.
And that's how we have compassion and connection, which is what we need to save this planet, right? So
But it's wild you bring. I'd forgotten. I can't even picture the bottles, Patty.
People
I,
gave them to you too?
oh, tons. That
Oh
and the
my
Book of
God.
Job. I was given so many Book of Jobs and so many bottles of rescue memory. If we look into the therapeutic world of the codependent triangle, rescuing is actually perpetrating, leading to victimhood,
Yeah.
and so we get caught
Oh.
in that. And so it's not about a magic wand. The beautiful thing is in having the chance to tell the story, that essence gets to continue, as well as I get to move into my present because I'm telling the story. So
Mhm.
I'm taking two dichotomies, past and present, and pulling them together again. And so
Mhm.
yeah, that rescuing is actually hijacking. It's such a big piece. I'd forgotten all about. I can even picture those bottles perfectly.
I didn't
Here,
know.
take this because then I can feel comfortable.
Well, and mirror neurons, is what I find fascinating now. I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit about how my sense is, we're firing when another person is having a grief experience and we're in full on connection with them, we're feeling their grief,
Yeah.
what we know about mirror neurons. And so that was my sense of people's discomfort. It's like, whoa, that feels really, really bad. I don't want to
Ah,
feel that. So let me take it away for you. But it's really
about them.
yeah.
Exactly. Because we are going to feel. I see that as spiritual as well as just as humans.
Hmm.
We are going to feel. And the big piece is I'm going to hold your story here.
Yeah.
Strong arms to my heart.
Oh, love that.
And all of a sudden, then I'm not hijacking your story.
Yeah.
I'm helping you. I'm getting to learn and glean wisdom, but I haven't done this, but I've held here your precious life and story.
Hmm.
That's where someone can feel safe
Right.
because I'm not broken.
Right. And it's something that we can all learn from in terms of how to hold that for people, which again is why the Inner Space Project is such a big passion of mine, because let's explore how to do that. I mean, that's a beautiful way to language it. And it's hard for all of us. It's hard for the people that are grieving and the people who want to support that person who's grieving. I have a friend who was just diagnosed with ALS,
Mm,
and that's hard.
that's hard.
And I don't know what to say. And she says, it's amazing what people will say to me. And how do we know how to hold those tender moments with people?
And like you said, languaging it, all of these pieces are deeper than language.
Mm, exactly.
That's it. So I don't have to word craft. I can just be. It actually, if we can get back to if we can sit with the discomfort, we don't have to word craft, and we're actually given the freedom just to be.
Yeah.
And there I'm not talking Ram Dass, you know, but I'm really talking about I'm just here with you. When my brother died, a wonderful man was a lawyer and a Vietnam vet and really got it, named Albert Sims. He called and all he said was, "Shit, man, I love you," and hung
Mm,
up. I didn't have to rescue him. I didn't have to have manners. I didn't have to have anything. But I knew my bro was there with,
mm,
"Shit, man, I love you."
mm-hmm.
I had the connection of love, and also this is really a tough situation.
Right.
And
Exactly.
I trust you, Ted, to walk through this, and you know I'm here if you need support. None of the story came about him.
Yeah.
Yet, in my wisdom, he is a big part of my story. Those pieces. He didn't wordcraft.
Yeah.
Once the platitudes come on, then there's not safety.
Right. So I trust you. I'm with you. I hear you. I mean, those
That's
are
it.
some things we can, and listen, right?
Listen, listen, listen. And also listen in the silence.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I believe, listen when someone needs an extra space.
Mm-hmm.
What can I do for you is sometimes needed, but mostly you means you've just put another job on me while I'm in a trauma state.
Right.
I'm here can be a big one. I send a lot of, because of, as you know, my world in northern New Mexico and southern Colorado, I send a lot of like 5 hearts. Nothing magical on 5. It might be 6. I don't know. And all I'm saying in a little nicer way is I'm here.
Yeah. I love you. Yeah. I love you.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
here's this energy going out, which means you use it's there. And so the door is open.
When Lawrence died, my partner died. It was going on 8 years ago now, and and that's what people would say. What do you need? I don't know what I need. I don't know what I need. So later, I wrote a little article about that, reflecting on what did I need, so I could tell people what
Yeah.
people need because they don't know what they need. I was like, just shut up and bring soup.
Yeah.
Just
But
show up.
on a lot of radio shows, I say, take grapes. They explode in someone's mouth and tell them if they like them or don't like them, but they know something present is happening. Because, that piece, I was irritated, which is part of grief because my skin has come off
Yeah. Yeah.
or I'm blowing out of my skin.
Yeah.
And so when people would say, what do you need? It took everything in me not to go, I need Carrie and Amy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's nothing else that I need.
Right.
There's nothing else that can replace that.
Right.
Over time, we all get to learn if we do our work, which just means we're being conscious. That's what's the cool thing about grief, because it's natural. It's being conscious of the process. Is I wasn't trying to get rid of that void.
Right.
I walk with that.
Right.
And
Right.
so it's changing to adapt with this piece. So I feel my loved ones in other situations it's really, okay, this is a lifetime process. How do I expand bigger than that void?
Right.
That's the piece that really is fun. I do want to say one thing, Patty, just because it's so important. You and I and your group know that loss comes in many forms.
Mm-hmm.
We can also have losses such as loss of innocence, safety, perpetration from rape, from horrendous things that might have perpetrated our space.
Mm-hmm.
We can still do this grief process. We're gleaning the wisdom and releasing the story.
Mm-hmm.
So like when I'm so excited I get to breathe for Carrie and Amy, even though I'm so sad that they don't get to breathe for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So even in situations where we're releasing something, so it has no power over me and I don't want relationship with it, I can glean that wisdom through this process. I can glean the wisdom to help me be of service and release that other piece.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so often forgotten because most of us talking about grief, it's about transforming the loved one and the physicality of the loved one to a spiritual connection,
Mm-hmm.
a metaphysical connection.
Mm-hmm.
This other piece we quite often, and that's why I like your show of the things we don't want to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And so even for me, the permission that there can be a horrendous part of my life where I don't want that person part of my life, but I can do the grief process to be present,
Mm-hmm.
glean wisdom, and release the perpetration.
Mm-hmm.
My
Which is,
book, in my book, I actually had to even go tell my family that I put that I was molested as 11-year-old because they didn't know that. And all of a sudden I went, oh, I published a book. I guess I need to break this secret of shame.
yeah, yeah.
And so, to realize, oh, I can do this transformational process. It doesn't mean I have to have this be okay.
Mm-hmm.
It means I can be safe and present today and glean wisdom from there.
It's such a good point. There's so many losses in our life that we don't see as losses. And, being sexually molested at 11 years old is a loss of your innocence. It's a loss
Yes.
of puberty and your childhood and exploring what sexuality may be in a quote unquote, if there is such a thing, normal world, So even I was talking, my first guest on Beginnings was Deanne Davies, who's a pioneer in infant mental health. We were talking about even childbirth is a loss
Yeah.
because we've lost the time in our lives where either we had no children or we had one child or whatever, but it's a loss, it's a transition. And so I think a lot of the postpartum depression is, so there's so many losses, moves, career changes,
Mhm.
me moving to Taos and back.
Yes.
So many losses in our lives. So when we have that wisdom that you're speaking to of, telling the story and being with how that deepens us, because I think that's grief completely deepens us if we allow it to.
Yeah.
So I think it's so.
No, that's beautiful. A lot of my doctorate was on something called obsessive passion.
Mhm.
It's where I'm defined in this situation. It was if I'm defined by my profession.
Mm.
If we take it back into the grief world, I'm defined by a historical Ted. If that happens, if I've got obsessive passion rather than harmonious passion,
Mhm.
what they found is obsessive passion leads to unethical and unhealthy behaviors
Mm.
because I'm actually caught in the past.
Right.
And so in that, I'm going to use, or I'm going to, because I'm fighting for something that's no longer here,
Mhm.
whatever that is. And so to keep that in mind, just like you're saying, so one of the big, when I was a dean at a college out in North Carolina, we worked so hard with the freshmen, partially business, if we go to that end, because it's cheaper to keep someone than have to go get another one, but also because there isn't a natural grief. Well, there is a natural, but we negate it after graduation from high school.
Mhm.
All of
Mhm.
a sudden, I'm in a new
Yeah.
residence. I'm in a new place. So
Yeah.
what do? We try to go get laid and we try to go get drunk and we try to go do all these
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I'm still caught as a high school kid where
Yeah.
maybe I had a parent saying, "Hey, maybe we stay here." And
Mhm.
so a big part of any transition is to naturally heal and realize, like postpartum, this has changed. I am going to have a natural dip
Mhm.
and start coming up again.
And addiction, you work in the field of addiction as well as grief. And you mentioned you're going to a treatment center and talking about grief as addictive in some ways, but just the use of substances, I think so often are there to numb out because we don't want to have this experience of what is going on related to the grief and the loss. And so we want to numb it out. So I think a lot of addiction is related to expressed or unallowed grief or whatever you want to call it.
I used to work at Betty Ford Center and I saw it there and then had a intensive outpatient here as well as working in other treatment centers. I even today have not heard of someone's addiction not coming from unresolved losses and trauma.
Mm-hmm.
I'm even going to take it to a brand new addicted baby
Mm-hmm.
because that means during pregnancy, and maybe if people believe past lives or genetic memory, even there, we're having trauma that brings us into substance
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
immediately. So I haven't not yet had a story where someone just naturally became an addict.
Right.
We
Right.
all can experiment, and part of that's trying to see what it's like to be out of our body or whatever that is. But with the disease of addiction, hundreds and hundreds, thousands of people, literally, I have not yet heard where there wasn't unresolved grief or trauma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And we could talk forever. And Ted, I would like to have you back on at some point too on the show because there's so much more I could talk and talk and talk. I want to kind of just finish this topic of your work in grief and then ask you questions that I'm asking all of our guests and then give you a chance to share how people can be in touch. But what else would you like to speak to in terms of your work with grief before I ask you the
The,
hot seat questions?
the hot seat questions, that's what I say on my radio. You got to be on my radio. Um, Witnessing or being in the idea that that is for today. I have a hard time with cliches because they've been overused, but usually they started with wisdom. And so
Mm-hmm.
this too shall pass isn't dismissing.
Mm-hmm.
So like when someone comes in right after a loss and they're like, there's no way I'm ever going to go on a date again. And I just haven't finished with today.
Mm-hmm.
That leaves potential open, it leaves hope open, it leaves excitement, which is fear and hope colliding, which gives a lot of energy. So really, if we can remember whatever we're feeling in this moment within a trauma or within a loss, grief is that bridge that brings us to the present. So what I'm in this immediately moment, this exact moment, does not mean that's tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
That can allow the brain to go, oh, this is not forever.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise we're caught in anguish.
Right.
And
So
then my brain's like, I don't know if I want to do this world.
exactly.
So if we
Present,
have the
present moment.
chance to remember, just today, I'm in this,
Mhm.
can leave that window of potentiality.
Which is the AA philosophy, right? One day at a time, you
One day
know.
at a time, and you talk to anyone, you know it from your world, I know it from mine, as professionally and personally, and many times that's one breath at a time.
One breath at a time. It totally is. Well, I appreciate you, Ted, and all the work that you do. And it's beautiful, beautiful stuff. I can't even give you enough kudos for what you do and how much I appreciate knowing that you're there for people in grief. So, my questions for all my guests start off with, what are your thoughts about exploring what I'm calling inner space here, that place inside us that contains the full spectrum of emotions from joy and love to sadness and fear? What are your thoughts about exploring that inner space?
The first time I saw your first podcast in this series, I have such a big piece of grief is really permission, permission, permission.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I felt about this whole piece was permission to go wherever the shadow side takes me,
Mm-hmm.
because it takes one sliver of light to shatter the dark. And the dark's not bad. We just got to put light there too. And
Yeah.
so I was so pumped on you asking me to be on your show, but also the idea of let's embrace it's not a black hole, but embrace the void just because we haven't explored it. So back to Captain Kirk.
I got the Kirk. I know. I know. Captain Kirk. I was saying in the first episode how William Shatner went to outer space with Jeff Bezos and came back and said he thought it was going to be a celebration, but it felt like a funeral. And it really made him grieve for the earth and how much we need to do here on this planet. So
We are able to.
we are doing it. And just by doing this, that's my hope for this podcast, is one tiny little speck of light. And any other of us light workers out there, that they're a little speck and they're a little speck and they're a little speck. It's so important. I love that. Permission. It's all about permission. How do you think raising mental health awareness impacts individuals and communities? I know it's kind of redundant to what you've already said, but
And it's not, it's blasting away the shame.
mm,
When I'm in loss and when I'm in trauma, it is all about me. It's where my brain will go.
mm-hmm,
It's just natural because my brain says I'm in discomfort, which means I'm going to die.
mm-hmm,
And so if I'm allowed to reach out to you, Patty, as a therapist, as a friend, or whoever, right there, I'm stepping out. So in having education, we shatter shame, which means we can ask for support. And we can also start to have healthy hands as we reach out because there's more education. Taos Ski Valley, now when something happens, they call me like this.
mm-hmm.
It's no longer we have to be tough, we have to be this. It's how do we emotionally support one another so we don't burn out?
Mm-hmm.
And compassion fatigue is around us all day if we like it or not. And so education allows us to connect, which I see as the spiritual glue that lets us realize we're a community.
Mm, beautiful. I love that, Ted. So the last question, what do you have any tools or tips that you might recommend to help people foster emotional literacy and agency?
Shut up and listen.
And bring soup.
If we start listening, then the storyteller has a chance to tell their story, which means they heal and I get to glean wisdom instead of thinking I need to interrupt and rescue. And in that, we can all start feeling safer to say, here I am.
That's so important, right? You mentioned at the very beginning about being seen and being heard, and that's our nature. If we go back, we're talking, the series we're going from beginnings, middles, and endings, and this whole full circle to attachment at the very beginning. Our basic need is to be seen and heard, and many of us didn't get that because we're just learning about attachment. It's kind of a new, hot off the press idea. So we're all kind of hungry to be seen and heard, and in an experience like grief especially, and knowing how to listen. So I love that. That's listen. shut
The,
up and
the,
listen.
what the beautiful piece you just said, the beautiful piece of grief is it's the end because there's a loss. So something died,
Mhm.
and grief is the rebirth
Yeah.
of the new. And so it's right in between those places. And in that, we honor everything else. When you brought that up in your last podcast, that flow is just such a continuous flow.
And it's funny you said that because I wanted to have you on as my first guest for that reason. But I thought, oh, people aren't going to get that. Let me just start with the beginning, because we're also linear. But I was like, I want to start with Ted because for that very reason, it is a birth
Yeah,
in a strange way. When something ends, something else can be born. If we have I call it tenacity,
yeah.
commitment, willingness, tenacity to experience the grief to then bring us to
It
this.
Grief is the bravery of a woman giving birth.
Mhm.
It is that because there's pain, and also then there's this enormous rebirth. And so it is that piece. It is the tenacity of saying, you know what, I'm not going to be comfortably miserable. I'm choosing to truly live.
I love that because comfortably miserable is a pretty typical experience these days.
Yeah,
People kind of are used to that. So I'm all about shaking that up a little bit.
me
Thank
too.
you so much, Ted. And again, I'd love to have you back. And how can people get in touch? You've mentioned the groups that are coming up.
In today's world, the best thing is to Google Golden Will Retreat, which of course our website is goldenwillretreat.org.
Okay.
And make sure you don't go to Golden Willow Counseling because we've combined that to something else. But goldenwillowretreat.org. And if you're still the phone type person, 575-776-2024. 575-776-2024. That has enough information. And then if you're interested in anything, get a hold of us. You can get Witnessing Ted on Amazon. And if you don't have $15, let me know and I'll send you one.
And your online groups are free, your grief groups.
They are
Anyone,
definitely
anywhere can join.
anywhere. We ask that people be over 15, just so that
Okay.
we're not accidentally hurting someone's innocence that maybe doesn't know the world's not that safe.
Yeah.
So 15 and up, any type of loss, and we just go through and they can come in at any time, and we just go through the grief process and
Wonderful.
share and connect.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again. Always such a gift to have you here and in my life. And yeah, until next time, do that
Well, I
with you.
love you and I
Okay.
appreciate you.
Love you too. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this inner space journey and we'll come back again for the upcoming episodes. For more information about the Inner Space Project and all the other offerings I have for you, please visit my website, www.pattiashley.com, PATTIASHLEY. Thanks again, and I'll see you real soon.